Hi, I'm Philip Carr-Gomm, and this is This Magical Life, your guide to the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and wisdom. Hey, hi, my name is Philip Carr-Gomm. I've been working in the Druid tradition for a number of years. I was lucky enough to meet the old chief Druid when I was young, 11. So that was like over 60 years ago. And so I've been immersed in a study of Druidry and a practice of Druidry ever since. It's a very natural human tendency to look elsewhere, to kind of never be satisfied with where you are and what you've got. And on the one hand, that's a kind of natural tendency in the human being, but the downside of it is we're constantly trying to travel away from the now and the here, and to either look back into the past or into the future or somewhere else. So we're kind of seduced by the exotic and the different, and neophilia is one way to talk about it. But actually, as we come in more into the present and we learn how to kind of open to the here and now, we realize that there's this tremendous tradition within these islands here, these ancestral traditions. And then the big question is, well, how do I connect with them? And for me, one of the most important things is, on the one hand, to respect the past and honor the past and to realize they're coming from the past, but also to be aware of the fact that we can access them now, in the moment. For me, connecting with ancestral traditions and the ancestral traditions of these islands in particular is, of course, there's an element of research and learning about folk traditions, the old ways, and so on. But for me, it's vital to include in that an entering into the now and the here. And what I mean by that is by opening to the land. There's a way in which it's as if almost the teachings of ancestral traditions are within the land. If we can drop beneath our judging analytical mind, we can start to receive inspiration, sometimes in a way that's hard for us to understand, but receive inspiration and nourishment, spiritual nourishment, and even intellectual nourishment. And by doing this, I think then it starts to become living. Then it starts to become living as opposed to being a study of what was past. In considering the role of elders, I think it's really important. I think the difficulty with that concept is it sets people apart. So you talk, there's an elder, and somehow they know more than you, they're superior to you, they're more wise than you, and so on. And that I think is problematic. If we understand eldership in a different way, that it's relational, an elder is only an elder in relation to other people. I think it's a term that has to be used cautiously and in a way that doesn't set up a them and us kind of situation. If you trace it back, for me, from a psychological point of view, it's like the necessity for parents. We need the guiding hand and the advice and the wisdom and the protection of parents to flourish and grow in the world. And so an elder, I think, is somebody who's perhaps walked a little further along the path, maybe has a little more experience than us, or is like a specialist in a way, who is immersed in a study of a particular tradition. And it's not that they're better than you or necessarily even wiser than you. It's just that they've kind of been immersed in this particular tradition for many years. And they can help you. So it's like a mentor. I almost prefer the term mentoring, I think. Well, there's a tremendous interest now in rewilding and this understanding that we're so lacking in biodiversity here in this country. And when you awaken to that, there's another kind of natural tendency in human beings is to only appreciate things when they're going out the door. Same thing's happening with nature, I think. And so as this is happening and people are waking up to the loss, the value in that painful and distressing experience is, well, there's still time to bring it back, which is why the whole rewilding movement is so important. But then I think you need to take another step, because otherwise it's all outside. And the mistake our kind of materialistic culture has bred is this belief that it's all outside, really, and we just have to get as much of possible of that outside in food and possessions and so on. Whereas really the mystical experience brings one to an understanding that inside and outside the barriers dissolve, and you realize that there's a kind of rewilding process that you need to go through yourself. So what does that mean? Well, what I think it means is that we have a civilized self, a cultured self, the result of our exposure to education and art over centuries and so on, all very valuable and wonderful. But it's tended to be at the expense of our natural self, our wild self. And we can actually have both. And one of the reasons why I particularly like the Druid tradition is it's got a strong emphasis on nature connection and getting back into the wild and connecting with the trees and the forests and the lakes and the rivers. But it's also got a strong emphasis on the arts and on the Bardic tradition of storytelling, of music and poetry and song and so on. And I think when you bring art and nature together, you have this fantastic combination, and it can inspire people to rewild their souls and their hearts. The lovely thing about Druidry is it's hidden in plain sight. But I suppose the wonderful thing about the internet is that it's only a few keystrokes away. If you just type Druidry into a search engine, our website is druidry.org, and it's huge and it's filled with films and music and stories and ceremonies. When I was young, I trained in Druidry personally with the old chief druid and his group. But what I was asked to do was to put these ideas and this training into a format that could reach people all over the world. So we have an online training in Druidry now that's available in 6 languages, and I've written a number of books, and we have the Druid Animal Oracle and the Druid Plant Oracle. So actually it's very accessible now, and wherever people are in the world, they can learn about Druidry and train in it. This wasn't the case when I was young, but it is now. It's very accessible. Well, it's very interesting working in the field of personal transformation and in a spiritual tradition because, over the years you get lots of feedback. Reviewing is a really good way to digest and come to understand what's been happening to you over the years. So I've had the privilege to read lots of these reviews and to see the changes that people have experienced and talk to people as well, of course. And what's lovely to see is that it's not just about personal transformations. Somebody can train in this field or come to follow Druidry or any other spiritual path and experience changes in themselves. They start to feel more integrated, more connected with other people and nature and so on, be inspired. And one of the particular kind of traits of Druidry is to focus on creativity, individual creativity. But it doesn't stop there, because what happens, of course, is that you start to influence other people. So members of your family notice a difference and your relationships improve. So you get this lovely ripple effect. And that's what's kind of so heartening about working in this field, I think, is you do see. And I remember one year thinking, I wonder what kind of environmental projects people are involved in. So I invited people in. And I got these incredible stories of people working with rivers and with different species and with particular projects, environmental projects. And what happens with a nature spirituality like Druidry is it feeds you, so you're less likely to get burnout. Because the risk with activism is that it's very easy to become depressed and burnt out because there's so much work to do. So you need a form of nourishment that feeds you at a kind of really deep level. And then you get the energy to do this work. And that's wonderful to see and heartening to see, I think. And it's so tempting to look to the East, all the wonderful Dharmic traditions in the East, or, more recently, people are looking to the West, to South America, with all the interesting traditions there. A little early in the 1980s and 90s, they were looking to North America, Native American traditions, because what's far away is always so colourful and appealing. If you look to the traditions in these lands, you just have to pause a bit. It's a very populated country, the British Isles, a lot of people in it, but nevertheless, you just have to go to the right places, open up in the right way, and then you can drop down, and then there's this wonderful kind of inspiration that comes from Merlin's Isle, as it used to be known. The thing about turning the gaze to the east or the west is it's very colourful. I mean, think of those wonderful Hindu ceremonies with flowers and incense, and then look to South America. There's a joy, as well as a kind of peace that you get, say, from Buddhism, but also a kind of joy, particularly in Hinduism, that you find. The joy in South America, kind of warmth. In Europe, the influence of Christianity, whilst in many ways there's been tremendous achievements in the extraordinary, Gothic architecture, and beautiful sacred music and stained glass and all the rest of it, there's a more sort of somber feel to it. And we don't need to go into the doctrinal difficulties and challenges that Christianity has introduced, concepts like original sin or the Protestant concept of the doctrine of total depravity, which is a doctrine. But these doctrines have had a kind of dampening effect on the expression of joy. Up until even quite recently in the Scottish Highlands, certain areas, people weren't allowed to play musical instruments or dance because this was an inappropriate expression of, So there's been some traumatization, really. And maybe we can even say, take the risk in saying that the development of Christian culture, despite its many benefits, also resulted in a certain traumatization of people, a fear of hell, which was instilled in people from a very young age. So you think what that's doing over the generations, layers of trauma being laid down. So there's redemptive work to be done. There's a work of healing of that. And I see an interest in indigenous traditions of these islands being engaged in some of that healing work. It's part of the task of acquainting people with our native traditions here, is to heal some of that traumatization, and to start to experience joy again. And then I think we'll start to see the colour and the joy and the celebration of life coming back. So maybe we had to lose connection with our indigenous heritage in order to reforge those links in a new way, to come into relationship in a new way. The very common experience that people have is that they're very drawn to the other cultures, East and West and so on, and learn a tremendous amount and revere them tremendously. But there's often a niggling feeling of imposter syndrome or wannabe whatever, which kind of bugs them. And then at a certain moment, they discover the richness of their own ancestral traditions. So it's very common to hear people saying, I want to get to know my tradition here. I don't know anything about it, but I can sort of feel it and touch into it. And I'm here starting to hear more about it. Because then you can sort of own it. You don't have to feel that you're engaged in any kind of cultural appropriation, any kind of imposter syndrome, truly connecting with your roots. And whether or not that's connected with ethnicity, from an ethnic point of view, if your family ancestry, there may be a tradition, or maybe not, but you happen to be living here now, and you feel a real connection to this place. Because after all, if you believe in reincarnation, you may have been born on the other side of the world, but now your incarnation is happening right here on this land, and this is a sacred land with all its traditions, and you want to learn about it. Be sure to subscribe, share, and join me next time for more inspiration.